Welcome to Real Therapy Gone Wrong, where film real meets real life. We are Lindsay Murray and Brandy Sellers, two sex therapists who point out the difference between Hollywood therapy and real life therapy. This show does not constitute a therapeutic relationship. Today's show is Lucifer, Season 1, Episode 6, titled Favorite Son, which can be viewed on Netflix. Brandy will recap the show, and we will chime in as we go along to comment on the therapy and other mental health issues. So, Brandy, take it away.
All right. This show, Favorite Son, aired February 29th, 2016. I wasn't familiar with the show Lucifer, but actually one of our fans recommended that we do the show. And so it was exciting to watch an episode and also just get to know about the premise of the show. So generally, the premise of the show is that Lucifer Morningstar, bored with his life as the Lord of Hell, abandons his throne to run a high-end nightclub called Lux in Los Angeles. And he also ends up working as a civilian consultant for local police. You know how you do, run a nightclub, consult with
It
police.
totally makes sense. Yeah.
Yes. Lucifer is an alternate version of the DC Comics character of the same name, created by Neil Gaiman, Sam Keith, and Mike Dringenberg for DC's Vertigo. It aired for 3 seasons on Fox and then got canceled, but it was one of those shows where there was so much fan support that Netflix actually picked it up and they aired 3 more seasons. The show won some awards, not necessarily for best acting, not that the acting is bad, but it's not totally stellar.
Yeah.
But it won an award from for bisexual representation.
Oh, okay.
It was best bisexual representation by lead character in 2017 and 2018. And the organization is called Bisexual Representation, which I didn't know existed. So that was interesting.
Awesome.
And it was nominated for various other awards, including some minor acting awards, cinematography, and best superhero series. This episode opens with Lucifer, played by Tom Ellis, playing piano and singing Sinner Man at his nightclub. Tom Ellis did do his own singing. I looked that up. Did not do his own piano playing. He doesn't play the piano.
Okay.
And he's not too bad, but this is a Nina Simone song. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's really good and soulful. And to hear this white man sing it was not quite working for me.
He didn't quite do it justice. It was definitely like karaoke night at the bar kind of version, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it was just it felt, I don't know, out of place, or it was cheeky though, since he's the
Mhm.
devil singing Sinner
Mhm.
Man. So that was interesting. But the shots go between this scene of him singing in the nightclub and a scene in a warehouse of a shipping container being stolen and a security guard being killed in the warehouse. So then in the next scene, we meet Detective Chloe Decker, played by Lauren German, and she's grilling her kid Trixie, who's played by Scarlett Estevez, about whether she ate the cake, which Trixie denies, even though there's cake all over her face. And Chloe's ex, Detective Dan Espinoza, played by Kevin Alejandro, is there as well. And Trixie tells him that Lucifer said that if you really want something, you should just eat it.
Mhm.
Next, we see Maze, who was played by Leslie Ann Brandt, come into Lux, which is the nightclub, with 2 women that she brought for Lucifer. So she's implying that they're going to have like a foursome situation.
Mhm.
Maze is a demon who, having served as Lucifer's head torturer in hell, joins him in Los Angeles to act as a bartender and bodyguard at the club. She's basically like his right hand person
Yeah.
at the club. And she tells him about the missing shipping container, and he leaves to consult with the police. So he shows up at the warehouse and tells Chloe that he gave up an epic foursome to be there. He finds out that the missing shipping container is his, and he and Chloe work to find the culprit. And Lucifer sees this as protecting his re- um, reputation as a police consultant in the city. And he tells Chloe that a gift from his father is inside the container.
Something
So,
that's quite funny too is speaking of like the women, like him sleeping with women. I think if you like when I looked up the description of this show, it says something like he's on Earth and he's like delving into what he really enjoys, which is like singing, nightlife, and women or something like that. So it's like one of his vices or something is part of the description of the show, which I read that before I watched the show. And so then it made a little bit more sense to me because I'd never seen Lucifer. So like that context, I was like, oh, okay. That's what he's doing.
Apparently, he also likes men, though, which in this
Yeah.
particular episode, he doesn't have any romantic situation with a man, but apparently
Mm-hmm.
at some point he does. So
Yeah.
go Lucifer. Um, so Lucifer and Chloe visit the snow cone man because they got a tip that he would know about this warehouse, and Lucifer sort of roughs him up and threatens him, and he gives up some information about who might have stolen the container. And then as they walk away, he and Chloe argue, and it's clear that Chloe does not trust him. And finally, we get to meet the therapist, Dr. Linda Martin, who is played by Rachel Harris. And she's in her office with Lucifer, and they're having a session. So Dr. Martin appears in almost every episode of Lucifer. It was kind of giving me Sopranos vibes with how much therapy
Yeah.
he's doing when I looked it up. She debuts in the pilot as a therapist related to a case that they're working on, and then Lucifer starts seeing her for therapy. In an earlier episode, he discloses he is the devil, which she thinks is a metaphor. In this episode, she asks about his identity, and he brazenly says, I'm still the devil. And when she asks what he's becoming, he says he's completely unbecoming. So then he says he's second guessing her skills as a therapist, and she does some interpretation saying, like, you feel judged, and so now you're judging me, and that's transference. So I thought it would be interesting to let people know about transference because it's not a word that
Yeah.
we really hear a lot
Mm-hmm.
outside of the as us as therapists. So transference in therapy means that a client basically is transferring feelings onto the therapist that are really about another person.
Mm-hmm.
So it's super normal, it happens frequently, but it's not something that I necessarily like. I don't usually use that word with clients
Well, the
necessarily.
therapist in this show is very I don't like her as a therapist, to be honest. Like watching her in the scenes, it was just kind of off-putting because she's very like she's direct, but it's almost like too much. Like she's like,
Mhm.
"Oh, here's what you must mean, and because you feel this, then it must mean this." And she's doing a lot of assuming for the client, which I did not like.
Yeah.
Because I was like, "That's your interpretation, but your interpretation could be wrong." And so I know I don't usually do that. I just ask. I might say like, "Hey, are you feeling judged right now? Like maybe you are, maybe I'm wrong about that. Like let's explore that." But she was very like, "Nope, here's what you feel and here's what it means and now you're judging me and that makes total sense and it's transference." And then it's all wrapped up in a bow. And
Yeah.
I was like, "Ooh, I don't like that." And it was also it was definitely very much TV therapy because, like, the confrontation he gives her, like, "I'm questioning your skills." That's not usually how a client would confront you. You get what I mean? Like, even when clients do challenge you, it's not usually like that in my experience. They don't just come out and say, usually, "I'm questioning your skills." You'll usually get other information, so it's anyways, going back to what you said, like, you don't really use that word. I don't really use that word either. I wouldn't tell a client, like, "I think this is transference," but I might say, if I find out that I remind them of their mom or something that they have a bad relationship with, I'll kinda take that angle of, "When I said this, did it remind you of something you've heard before from someone else?" And I might go in it that way.
Yeah.
Not the way she did it in this scene. It was very odd, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I do she is like, I reflect meaning a lot, but I don't do it in a way of like, "This definitely means this." I do it as, like, a checking out, and
Yeah.
I love it when my clients say, like, "No, it's not that, it's this."
I love
Because
it too because we're
yeah.
giving it's their voice, like, "Hey, this is a space where I want you to like, don't let me tell you what you feel because that's probably what their life experience is." And
Yes.
I don't want this to be that.
Right.
Um, I agree. I love when clients do that.
Yes. Also, the fact that they can feel like they can disagree with me, I think points to a strength in their relationship. So
Yeah.
whenever that happens, I feel happy about it. I'm happy to be wrong.
Yeah,
But
me too.
I I so some of the types of transference that can happen, it can include paternal or maternal. And I think for me, this might happen with a lot of my clients because I end up with a lot of clients who maybe didn't get nurtured from their moms, and I tend to be very nurturing, and so I
Mhm.
think that is something that is therapeutic for them. And it also can include sexual transference where a client is attracted to the therapist, which I think one time I had a client who maybe had a crush on me, but it wasn't something that we addressed and like it wasn't part of our therapeutic relationship. We were working on other things.
Mhm.
But it can happen and it's normal and it's not something that needs to even end the relationship. But if it becomes a big part of what's happening, then we would just talk about it.
Yeah, I feel like you can resolve that. If a client I've never had it happen to me, but if a client ever expressed feelings like that, like sexual feelings or romantic feelings or feelings that are just different from like I'm your therapist, I think you can process it together and sometimes it usually does come from the fact that we might be the only nurturing, empathetic listener in their lives and it's hard not to have feelings for someone who's really there for you. So, I agree with you. I don't think it needs to end the relationship. I just think
Yeah.
you explore it.
Where it can get fucked is if the counselor doesn't explore it appropriately and they end up sleeping with their client, which is the second biggest complaint against counselors with the board, at least for LPCs,
Mhm. Mhm.
is people having sex with their clients. So, like, transference can lead to that if a client is flirty and the counselor doesn't address it appropriately.
Which
So,
this therapist does sleep with Lucifer, not in this episode, but they like hint there's like something he says that made me go like, "Wait, did they sleep together?" And then what's funny is I actually my husband has seen Lucifer, so I ended up just texting him and I said, "Did Lucifer sleep with his therapist?" He goes, "Yep, they went to Bone Town." And I was like, "Okay, well, that's what I needed to know." So then you find that out as well that they've had this sexual relationship on top of doing therapy, which is like
just a
totally
no.
fucked. Yeah.
Yeah. So, one of the things I did enjoy in this scene, though, because he's just a funny character and he's
Mhm.
not written as all bad.
Yeah.
And when I was researching the show, I found that this was in Wikipedia, so take it for what you will. But before the show first aired, the American Family Association website, 1 Million Moms, launched a petition to prevent the series from airing. The petition stated that the series would glorify Satan as a caring, likable person in human flesh.
God.
And they got 31,000 signatures. But nobody likes a villain who's 100% an asshole. Like, nobody is one dimensional. Nobody's 100% good or 100% bad. So I like that they, even though he's the devil, they made him
Yeah.
likable.
I
Um,
agree with you. It's a representation of how complicated people are, and he is a person in this show. I mean, he's on Earth. He's a person and he's complicated. And yeah, you're right. If someone is 100% villainous, it's not really enjoyable to watch because you're kind of like, can we just kill them off already? Or like,
yeah.
what are we doing here? Yeah.
So back to Dr. Martin's office, Lucifer leaves and Amenadiel comes in. Amenadiel is played by DB Woodside, very attractive. He's Lucifer's older brother, and he's an angel and the eldest of all of the siblings. He comes to Los Angeles to encourage Lucifer to go back to hell because Lucifer is like not doing his job and they need somebody to do that job. So Amenadiel is posing as a therapist who is consulting with Dr. Martin about a case, and he offers to consult with her on Lucifer's case. We find out in later episodes they actually get together and she has a child by him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I found that in my research. She's like the first TV character to give birth to a half human, half angel child.
She's very intertwined with this family, let me tell you.
Seriously. She's banging all the brothers. Lucifer finds Chloe and apologizes, and they go to this biker bar based on the tip from the snow cone person. And Lucifer causes a huge scene when he comes into the room because he just doesn't really have like any social graces, right? So they talk to the boss of Los Diablos, who's the biker gang who runs the bar, and he denies knowing anything. But Chloe's not really buying this. And so they wait and follow him to see where he goes. Then we flash back to Amenadiel and Dr. Martin, and they're having wine. And he tells her that she should accept that Lucifer is the devil, and he tells her he knows so much about the Bible and he can help her. And he says the devil is essentially a rebellious son and that he has an idea to help. Of course, he has an ulterior motive and
Mhm.
not he's not true. So we're seeing Chloe and Lucifer on the stakeout, and she tells Lucifer she thinks that he is hiding something. And he tells her that he'll never lie to her, and the container is holding Russian dolls. And she doesn't really believe him. But then they see the boss of Los Diablos get shot, and Lucifer chases the killer. And Lucifer and the killer end up on a roof, and Lucifer shows his devil eyes, and the
Mhm.
killer jumps because he's so afraid of the devil. So Chloe comes actually at the time that the person jumps and sees him jump and says that they actually found the shipping container. So Lucifer shows Chloe that it does, in fact, contain this small chest that is full of Russian dolls. And then
Mhm.
Chloe just says whatever and she leaves. But then Lucifer goes and opens a hidden door at the back of the container to reveal that someone has stolen the true gift his father gave him, which was his angel wings.
Mhm.
So we see Lucifer back with Dr. Martin, and he is upset that his items are gone. He doesn't tell her what they are. She wants to talk about his identity some more, which annoyed me because he came because he was sad about.
Yes, he got annoyed, and he had every right to be annoyed. It's like coming and saying, "Oh, I've been robbed," and then your therapist is like, "Okay, but how does that relate to your identity?" You'd be like, "What the fuck? That has nothing to do with my identity. I'm mad that my shit was stolen," you know?
And then she says that God casting Lucifer out was a gift. And because in the Bible, God casts Lucifer out of
Mhm.
heaven and makes him the
Mhm.
ruler of hell. And that was also annoying because if I went to therapy and my counselor told me that something bad that happened to me was a gift, I and people actually say this because I'm a cancer survivor. And people say that sometimes, like, well, nothing happens. Everything happens for a reason. And when God closes a door, he opens a window, and all those dumb things that
Yes.
just felt so invalidating to me. So I was really annoyed
Well, because
that,
it comes across as like, you really shouldn't be upset about this because it
right,
really was a gift, and it's like, but he is upset, and so you need to just let him be upset. Like, it was just an awful the identity thing, and then that it being a gift, I was like, "Oh, no, this session is, like, going sideways awfully quick."
for sure.
Mhm.
She says that he needs to embrace all that he is. And he says he cannot embrace it because they stole it from him. He's referring to the wings, which she doesn't know. And then he punches a wall and leaves. So this was just all not a good confrontation that she did about something that he didn't even come to therapy to address.
Mhm, mhm,
The last scene we see his back and you see the scars where his wings would go. And then we see his wings, assumably in the possession of someone else. So that's when you find out that it was the wings that were stolen,
mhm.
as at the end of the show.
Yeah.
So, do you have any other comments about the show?
Um, I don't think so. I think, I mean, I've already kind of said this, but not a fan of the therapy. I mean, aside from like the fact that they've slept together before, because I think in the first session we see, I think he even gets up and he's like, "All right, let's go." He starts taking off his shirt, or he's
Yeah,
like about to unbutton it, and she's like, "Not now. That we'll save that for later," or something like that. And I was like, "Ew,
yeah,
that was
gross.
gross." But even like aside from that, just like therapeutic skills, um, it just seemed like the therapist was not listening at all. She kinda came in there
Mhm.
with her own agenda and, like, that's what they were gonna do, and to me, that's just terrible therapy. I don't come in with my own agenda. I try to see where they're at
Yeah, I
and
agree.
where we're gonna go from there, yeah.
Yeah, she gets maybe 1 star. She is warm, so we'll give her a
Yeah.
star for that. So I was thinking this week before the outro, since our show was short this week, that we could talk about licensure because it's not really
Mhm.
something that we have talked about.
Yeah.
So Lindsay is an LPC in Texas, a licensed professional counselor, and I'm licensed in Texas, Colorado, and Vermont. I do all telehealth. And we're both certified sex therapists with ASECT, which is the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, which basically means we spent a ton of hours and a ton of money getting specialized education about how to work with clients who are struggling with sexual health issues or maybe who don't have sexual health information.
Yeah.
So, Lindsay, what is one interesting or surprising thing you've encountered as a sex therapist?
So I work mostly with couples, which is where we differ. Like I think you see a lot more individuals than I do, and I work mostly with couples. And so when a couple comes to see me, a lot of times the presenting issue will be around sex, whether it's like one partner has a higher libido than the other, or maybe one partner is kinky and the other person's not, or maybe they want to open their relationship but don't know how to navigate it. So I kind of work a lot from like that relationship aspect. To me, the most surprising thing I think I have learned in all of my experience so far is the lack of information about what consent really is and also the amount of sexual coercion that happens in relationships. So sexual coercion essentially is actually pulled up like a definition. I'm just going to read it verbatim. Um, but by definition, sexual coercion is the act of using pressure, alcohol or drugs, or force to have sexual contact with someone against his or her will and includes persistent attempts to have sexual contact with someone who has already refused. And so sexual coercion can be very blatant, like if your partner like holds you down and doesn't let you go, then we're getting into like assault territory and dangerous and like I think those are the more obvious, but sexual coercion can also be I said no to my partner and now they're pouting and giving me the cold shoulder and giving me the guilt trip and they're going to remain in a bad mood until we have sex. That is also sexual coercion. It's also pressure and it also doesn't work. I can promise you it never works. I mean, they might give in, but like is that pleasurable sex when your partner just caves cuz they want to get you off of their back? No, that's not really a
No.
good time for anyone. That happens so often, more than I would have thought. And so sometimes when I'm looking at a couple and it's desire discrepancy, that's one of the first things I look for. Is there
Mhm.
coercion or pressure happening? And then like what do we need to do about that? If you're the high libido partner, I get it that it doesn't feel good to be that partner that wants more of the physical connection and your partner doesn't. I get that that doesn't feel good, but I can guarantee you if you use like pressuring techniques to make it happen, you're really working against yourself. It's never going to work. So that coercion and consent. Consent is not as simple as like black and white. There's a lot of misinformation about it, and so sometimes half of my job is just educating on what is consent, going over I'll include this link in the episode description, but I'll pull from like Betty Martin's Will of Consent and
Mhm.
what consent does and doesn't look like. It's just educating on that and consent violations too. If there's consent violations happening, let's identify those and try something else that isn't violating that can hopefully like reconnect the couple. So, anyways, that is probably the biggest thing I see that really surprised me.
Yeah, I literally don't know how many times I have heard some variation of my partner is groping me or fucking me while I'm asleep and I wake up, or some variation of that, and that is just not okay unless you agreed to
No.
that and consented to that ahead of time. So
Well,
that
and then partners will get upset that their partner got upset. So like if someone is always groping their partner and their partner like eventually like being nice about it doesn't work and they stop being nice about it. I mean, I've had partners literally be like, "Get the fuck off of me. I don't want you groping me." Well, then that partner will get upset and they're like, "Well, they were like so mean to me." And I'm like, but I mean,
yes,
you've
they
got to, it's like,
were.
yeah, you've got to understand like they're at their wits' end. They've already told you to stop and you're not stopping. And so they're gonna, I mean, no one is gonna remain calm forever in that kind of situation. So, that's another thing too. Well, look at how they talk to me. I'm like, but look at what you're doing though, right? There's constant violations happening here. So it's really, really tough work. It's really, really tough work. And if that dynamic continues to play out, um, sex doesn't get better in the
Right,
relationship. So
and the relationship will definitely not get better.
no.
I think one of mine is also just lack of sexual health information in general. I've worked with people who have college degrees and adulty type professional jobs, and the lack of information about sexual health in general, even sometimes like avenues for pregnancy, sexual protection from STIs and things like that.
Hmm.
The knowledge that you should talk about what you're doing while you're having sex and get consent as you go, and like, does this feel good, or here's what I want, that sort of thing. Just generally a lack of sexual health information. And I think it's easy because Lindsay, you and I have we did the certification and we took all
Yeah.
these sex therapy classes, and sometimes it's easy for me to forget, where I was when I was 25, and that I also had a lack of a lot of this information. So
Yeah.
that is one thing that consistently surprises me, is just the lack of sexual health information. And because our sex education in our country really sucks, and it affects a lot of people negatively in a lot of ways. So
Yeah, I agree. I know we're therapists, but I do feel like a majority of our job is educating too, of just like, well, here's actually the facts. Um, I see that a lot around orgasm. Like if either partner doesn't have an orgasm, it seems like this huge issue. And sometimes I'm just educating on like there really might not be any issue at all, to be honest. Like sometimes that just happens and how you react to it is what really determines like how that's going to continue to go. I mean, same with like erectile dysfunction. Like a lot of men will really, and rightfully so. I mean, I can understand if you're having issues with erection and you're like in your 30s, men will really freak out about that. But sometimes I just try to educate, aside from like medical issues. If there's no medical issues, then we're just educating on, if you're anxious and stressed, that can affect it. And if you continue worrying about it, then you just increase the anxiety and the stress, and then you continue having, you know what I mean? It's like a very vicious cycle. And so sometimes we're just educating on that and then trying to teach them other ways to cope with it. So
yeah,
the next time it's not as stressful and you're not really having to worry about it as much.
yeah, and also just normalizing that these are things that happen. Bodies are imperfect. They don't
Yeah.
perform how we want them to 100% of the time. And
Yeah.
okay, awesome.
Absolutely.
I think that's our episode. If you
Yeah.
enjoyed this week's episode of Real Therapy Gone Wrong, please like, review, subscribe, and follow us where you listen to your podcasts. And our next episode, we're doing a listener request, and we will discuss the show Couple to Thruple, season 1, episode 3, entitled Jealousy. You can stream Couple to Thruple on Netflix. If you'd like Real Therapy Gone Right, we are two actual therapists who help clients on a daily basis. Contact us if you'd like to learn more about our work or want to hire us. You can find Lindsay at relationshipmatterstx.com or Brandy at sellerscounseling.com. Our show email is realtherapygonewrong@gmail.com. That's REEL. If you're making a movie or a TV show and do not want to find yourself on our show, we are available to consult on your project. So get in touch. Thank you.
Bye.